problem with burning coal as an electricity source is if you continue to burn coal, you're always going to continue to produce a toxic byproduct, which is coal ash.
Coal ash is a national problem. It's funny because people don't know that much about it, but it's huge.
It's pretty ironic to me that right on the Duke Energy monitoring wells closest to this well, they say that it's hazardous and not suitable for drinking water.
I couldn't hardly hear what they were saying to me because I was replaying in my mind every time I had fixed a jug of Kool-Aid, every time I had made a pot of tea. All I could think about is, what have I done? What have I allowed my children to drink?
In 2014, one of the worst environmental disasters in the U.S. occurred at a coal-fired power plant in North Carolina, when a sudden breach sent up to 39,000 tons of toxic waste and 27 million gallons of contaminated water into the Dan River, making it the third largest spill of its kind. The waste, known as coal ash, is what's left over when coal is burnt for electricity, and it contains some of the worst carcinogens on the planet. But it's also what keeps our lights on and has fueled the economy and the infrastructure of this country for more than a century. According to the Energy Information Administration, there are approximately 642 coal-fired power plants across 48 states in the U.S. today. And where there's coal being burnt, there's going to be coal ash. Our years of dependence on coal as an energy source has left us with millions of tons of this pollutant, and no one has come up with a safe way to store it. The Dan River spill is the most recent reminder of what can go wrong. This has caused controversy across the country, and international organizations like the Waterkeeper Alliance are battling with energy companies and the U.S. government to do more to address the environmental and health risks coal ash poses. Here in North Carolina, where coal ash has caused the most recent damage, the Waterkeepers are fighting against Duke Energy, the largest utility company in the country.
We're on the river in North Carolina looking out for some coal ash ponds. Coal ash is the second largest industrial waste stream in the United States, and it's a byproduct of coal and carries heavy metals such as arsenic, chromium, and lead. So what are we looking at right now?
This is Duke Energy's Cliffside Power Plant on the banks of the Broad River. It's a coal-burning power plant, and the problems with that are it discharges coal ash into the Broad River. There's ponds across the state of North Carolina at 14 power plants, and all of them pollute the groundwater. And everyone that's been investigated is illegally discharging toxic metals into area waterways.
Coal ash contains some 15 toxic heavy metals, including many of the most dangerous substances that naturally occur on Earth. They have been known to cause health issues ranging from asthma to cancer.
Burning coal is pretty costly. You know, people say it's this great cheap energy source. It's really not when you factor in the true cost of what coal is. And all of a sudden things like wind and solar are a lot more affordable and attractive. They never have a solar spill.
The reality is, coal is still a vital part of our everyday lives. It makes up 39% of our electricity and is projected to hold steady for the next decade. So it's a problem that isn't going away anytime soon.
Coal ash is a national problem. It's funny because people don't know that much about it, but it's huge. Because coal ash is generated wherever we burn coal in power plants, then wherever we have power plants that burn coal, we have coal ash. So there's coal ash in well upwards of 40 states.
In fact, 47 states across the U.S. deal with coal ash, and an estimated 113 million tons of it is generated every year. Storing that waste has been the root cause of some of the worst environmental disasters, including the largest coal ash spill in history at a power plant in Tennessee, which made headlines across the country.
People in Roane County, Tennessee still aren't sure this evening just how bad a disaster they are facing.
More than 1 billion gallons of toxic sludge leaked last Monday when a retention pond crumbled outside this coal-burning power plant.
A lot of coal ash is stored in what are called impoundments or ponds. These are obviously, liquid holding areas where coal ash has been mixed with water. Coal ash can also be stored dry in huge mounds. There are mountains of dry coal ash in some parts of the country. The very worst way to deal with coal ash is to let it to be exposed to water. When coal ash is exposed to water, the toxic substances in coal ash leak out. It's actually called leaching, out into the water and then can travel through the environment. Think of it like making coffee. You have your grounds, you have your water. You pour the water on top of the grounds, the essence of coffee comes into your cup. That's lovely. The essence of coal ash is not lovely. The essence of coal ash is extremely dangerous.
For years, environmentalists warned the next Kingston spill could happen, the big spill that happened in the TVA dam. Duke Energy said that'll never happen. This is not dangerous. We're not violating any laws. This stuff's the same as dirt. And then you had the Dan River spill. And it turned out that all those people warning of that were correct. This stuff is dangerous. You can have these catastrophic spills, but regardless of a catastrophic spill, this stuff's polluting every single day. It's polluting our groundwater and our rivers.
The coal ash leaks through the ponds into the soil, eventually making its way into the water. These leaks are known as seeps.
Seep seems to be a little bit of a misleading name. When you look at these, they're kind of like tiny tributaries leading down into the river.
We've seen, in the Asheville power plant, there's up to 1 million gallons a day of these seeps. So seep is a little misleading because when you add up a series of these, there's several more downstream, you get a pretty decent amount of pollution illegally being discharged to the Broad River.
So behind us, we see some of these kind of rusty metal pipes that seem to really lead to nowhere. Do you know anything about them?
I've been by here before and seen coal ash seeps coming out of the pipes. We've tested them. We found this whole bank here is really high in toxic heavy metals, particularly arsenic. Was almost 30 times the water quality standard for North Carolina. And they do not have a permit to discharge arsenic into the Broad River right here. So these are a violation of the Clean Water Act.
Duke has challenged these findings, and it's clear that the power company and the Waterkeeper Alliance don't see eye to eye. But according to North Carolina State, all 14 power plants tested have had groundwater contamination violations. Speaking to Aaron Culbert, a spokesperson for Duke Energy, it seemed the discrepancy was in the relevance of these findings.
There are some times when we have slight exceedances of permit requirements, but it's very infrequent. I think that really at the heart of all of this is a belief on the behalf of some advocacy organizations that the amount the industry can release is zero.
At the bottom of it, though, you both are still dealing with these facts. Where's the disconnect here?
I will say that much of the information that I have seen from the advocacy groups is true to a point, but they do have a habit of exaggerating things. They do have a habit of mischaracterizing things, and that's unfortunate because playing on the emotion of neighbors around our facilities is not right.
So are you insinuating that these advocacy organizations may not be telling the truth here? Or who's not telling the truth here?
I am not insinuating anything. I'm actually telling you that many of these advocacy organizations don't tell the complete picture. So that's why it's important to have an open dialogue so that folks can hear information from multiple sources and make good decisions on their own.
To get the complete picture for ourselves, we meet up with Donna from the Waterkeeper Alliance as she takes us through the process of testing a well at resident Sherry Gobble's home.
So the bottle comes pre-fixed with a preservative. It's evidence sealed at the lab. And for the first time in the field, I'll break this seal and then collect the hexavalent chromium sample.
The Gobble's well is near the Duke Energy Buck plant, and it's just 237 feet away from the largest unlined coal ash pond in the area.
Well, it's pretty ironic to me that right on the Duke Energy monitoring wells closest to this well, they say that it's hazardous and not suitable for drinking water. Because this well is deeper than the ash ponds, if you believe that water flows downhill and can flow 237 feet, then the potential is for the groundwater contamination out of that leaking coal ash pond to travel just 237 feet to this well. When we tested at this well earlier this year, we found both total chromium and hexavalent chromium in this well.
Hexavalent chromium is a known carcinogen that can lead to health issues from irritation of the nose and throat to cancer and birth defects. When the Waterkeeper Alliance tested this well in April, they found the hexavalent chromium levels at 4.6 parts per billion. And while the EPA has set the maximum contaminant level for chromium at 100 parts per billion, The incredible toxicity of the carcinogen has led many to argue that nothing over 0.02 is safe.
Come on in.
Your house is so beautiful.
Thank you. This is the living room.
Seems like you have a straight view.
Yes, yes. This is what we see every day. Now, when we first built this house, the trees were not dead like they are now. It didn't look this bad.
When did you first start testing your well?
When the Dan River spill happened, my husband and I kind of looked at each other and said, should we be concerned here, you know? Our neighbors down the road had already been talking with river keepers and water keepers and called us and told us, you know, they were concerned. Maybe you need to think about having your well tested. So that's when the water keepers came and tested our well, and we got the news we got that we have hexavalent chromium in our well. I just remember shock, feeling shock, and I couldn't hardly hear what they were saying to me because I was replaying in my mind every time I had fixed a jug of Kool-Aid, every time I had made a pot of tea. I was picturing in my mind. So I really couldn't even pay attention to what they were saying because as a mom, all I could think about is, what have I done? What have I allowed my children to drink? And just sheer fear went all over me.
After the Gobbles found out their drinking water was contaminated, they decided to stop using it entirely.
This is the kitchen. I do a lot of cooking. And of course we use bottled water for about everything now. Bathing, brushing teeth, everything.
That must be quite an adjustment.
It is. It's hard because you don't realize, you know, what you're missing until you can't use it anymore, and then you have to figure out a new way of doing things.
Part of the reason why they decided to stop using the well water is the high rate of illnesses in the neighborhood.
Because we just don't have enough scientific evidence to know what the effects of hexavalent chromium are. And I'm not going to point directly at the coal ash, but I'm going to tell you I have my concerns and I wonder how this happened. But we do have a son that has a birth defect, a neurological birth defect.
Got first place on that. And
I do wonder if this affected him, because there are other birth defects in our community.
I got first place on that. Yay.
So your mom has said that a lot of people in this neighborhood get nosebleeds. Do you ever get nosebleeds?
Yeah, a lot. I just had, like yesterday or the day before that, I had like 3 or 4 in one day.
How does it make you feel to know that there are heavy metals in the tap water?
Well, it kind of makes me feel like, wow, that's, you know, that's shocking. It was shocking at first to learn that, and too, it kind of made me like sad and angry at the same time that they didn't tell us.
Listening to him say that just brings tears to my eyes. It just, man. It's one thing when it affects you, but when it affects your children, it's a whole different thing.
A few of these neighbors are concerned to the point that they don't even use the water in their homes anymore.
I have heard that, yes.
What is the response to that?
It's a challenge because industries are regulated in such a way that they can release constituents to creeks and rivers, but they have to do so within limits. And then there's others who believe that you shouldn't be able to release anything at all. You know, I can touch coal ash, you know, I could interface with it. We have folks who work with it, obviously, at our facilities. It's not corrosive to the skin. It wouldn't cause you any skin issues. You could simply wash it off like you would dirt.
In December 2014, the EPA made its first ever ruling on coal ash, officially classifying it as a non-hazardous material, which means it can be treated pretty much the way we treat everyday garbage, and leaves utilities like Duke Energy to police themselves.
The industry has a pretty poor record in terms of monitoring, in terms of safety systems, and now increasingly in terms of cases that are known to have created real risks for human beings by allowing leakage or other contamination outside of the utility property. I don't see a record on the part of the utilities that would inspire me to say, great, let's let them handle this problem now and into the future.
The new ruling means dealing with coal ash falls squarely on the shoulders of the state and its residents. In Pennsylvania, a state with the most coal plants and coal ash in the country, the problem has become more important than ever. One of the few success stories in the fight against coal ash has been the closure of Little Blue Run, a coal ash pond so big it can be seen from space.
Behind me is Little Blue Run, which is the largest coal ash impoundment in the U.S., poorly disguised as a lake with this unnatural blue color. It spans over 2 states and contains 20 billion gallons of coal ash.
Little Blue was built in the 1970s, and over the years has leached large amounts of arsenic and selenium into the nearby communities. When the residents discovered the chemicals seeping onto their property, they notified the state that they were going to sue First Energy Power if the problem wasn't fixed.
The Environmental Integrity Project went to the federal government and said, you know, we want something done about this or we're going to sue the federal government. So the federal government, I guess, went to our state DEP and told them they better get their act together and make them close it down.
Just 59 days later, the federal court ordered First Energy to close the pond and begin the long process to clean up the site. Sandy Wright has advocated for the closure of Little Blue ever since it failed to live up to the energy company's promises.
They showed us this beautiful lake that looked like a nice state park. It had a motorboat on it with a girl on water skis. It had, you know, somebody fishing in a cove, and it just looked like a great place. They explained that we would have almost lakefront property because we only live about 1.5 miles from it. So we were pretty excited about that. But over the years, things went south.
When did you start questioning what was going on down there?
Some of the local hunters were seeing stuff coming out of the hillsides, and they said, gee, it looks sort of bluish and foamy like the stuff that's inside the impoundment. Environmental Protection went down there and investigated, and they found that, yes, the stuff was leaking out through the hillsides.
There are over 100 seeps at Little Blue, and closing the pond won't solve this. That's because closing the pond really means covering it and throwing some soil on top. So all that coal ash will still be there with the same problems underneath.
To us, it's just going to aggravate the problem. We think it's going to create more hydraulic pressure on what's going out into these old mine shafts or these, you know, cracks in the hillsides. I believe it's like trying to put cookie dough in a spaghetti strainer, and then you stick a brick on top of the cookie dough. It's going to push it out through the holes, through any holes it can find. So even though it's covered up, it might be gone from your view, but what's underneath it is still going to be there.
So the largest coal ash impoundment in the United States is not really being closed, it's just being covered with soil.
That's right. It'll never be, the problem will never go away because they're always going to have to watch and see how far it's going, how far it's traveling underground.
There's a certain finality to saying that Little Blue Run is going to be closed, but how far-reaching is the issue?
I don't think anyone really knows. It's going to take, I believe, 15 years to get the closure completed. And I think, you know, it's going to be somebody's concern for a long time. If the people that make the regulations would just come out and walk a mile in our shoes and see what we're dealing with and understand that they wouldn't want it in their backyard. Sure, you have to dispose of the coal ash somewhere, but let's do it right.
Whether or not there's actually a safe way to deal with coal ash remains to be seen.
The coal ash elements are going to outlast the pond, and so we have a toxic legacy issue here that's going to be with us until we can figure out how to box this stuff up and keep it out of contact with the environment.
A Pennsylvania company called Ebensburg Power says they've found a solution. In the midst of trying to deal with the coal refuse piles littering the state, they discovered they could burn it, generating cheap electricity and producing what they claim is a safe coal ash.
So everything around us, these are all coal refuse piles.
Right, this is all coal refuse.
What do you guys do with all of this?
Well, what we do is we process it, and we take the finer material and use it as fuel to make electricity at our power plant. At the power plant, we mix limestone in with it. Now the reason why we do that is that coal ash is alkaline material. It's got a high pH material. This reject material has sulfur compounds that make low pH material. So we neutralize that sulfur and encapsulate that material so that it does not leachate out, if you will, and cause potential water problems.
What this means is, when coal ash is mixed with limestone and burnt, a chemical reaction occurs that effectively sucks all the sulfur out of the coal ash, making it a stable solid that won't leach heavy metals into the ground. The end product is trucked from the plant to reclamation sites and is used to fill old mines.
We're on about 60 acres of land, and what we've done here, we've removed about 1,200,000 tons of coal refuse, and we'll bring back about the same amount of coal ash to reclaim the site.
Everything around here then is coal ash?
Yes, we're standing on coal ash. This was just brought from the power plant here, 20 minutes ago. We're standing on it. You see a little steam, that's from the moisture coming off.
Is it safe to have it just kind of hanging around out here, out in the open?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And how much of this stuff do you bring around every day?
Every day, we probably generate about 1,200 tons of coal ash a day. We're taking that and eliminating the burning by removing the coal refuse and using it as fuel for electricity. And we're remediating the water runoff. So we're solving air pollution problems, water pollution problems, returning the scars of the land to usable land, and kind of rejuvenating the communities. So it's really a win-win. It's just a great story.
While companies like Ebensburg are optimistic, the fact is it's too early to tell if this is a win-win. Even though they'll monitor these sites for the next 2 decades, there isn't enough data to guarantee that solutions like this aren't just a temporary fix.
It's crazy to think that they're just bringing trucks and trucks of coal ash up here, throwing some grass on top of it, and calling it a day. And what's even more absurd is that this is the most high-tech solution that we have.
This problem is not going away. This problem is not going anywhere. The materials that are toxic are elements. They are going to stay with us. They may stay where they are for 20 years. They may stay where they are for 50 years. They may stay where they are for 100 years. But then what? It's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for our children and our children's children. Really, the best solution to coal ash is to stop burning coal.
Our dependence on coal in everyday life means we will continue to burn it. Even if we were to stop burning coal today, we would still be stuck with the millions of tons of coal ash we've already created. Energy companies are being allowed to police themselves, with little oversight from the federal government, which means coal ash ponds across the country will continue to leak dangerous pollutants into the water, and another disastrous spill is almost inevitable. Unless we come up with a permanent solution for a substance that will stay toxic essentially forever, these deadly materials will continue to threaten the environment and our health.